Ever since Halo 3 came out, I always thought something about its campaign was a little off. I would blast through this game having the time of my life. It was just an absolute roller coaster ride from start to finish, but by the time the credits would roll, something felt either missing or abrupt or just not quite what I thought it was going to be. And I could never figure out what or why. What was it about this game that's lauded as a masterpiece, a game I recognize to be some of the most fun I've ever had in a game? Why was this absolute joyride of a campaign always leaving a feeling of hollowness? We are now about 14 years removed from Halo 3 and all its hype, and I think part of Halo 3's issues have been somewhat lost to time. And me, I'm gonna unfortunately be that crazy girlfriend digging up old shit and throwing it in your face.
You know this is? You! I swear to you!
A lot of people's first Halo game was Halo 3. It spawned an entire subculture. Halo 3 was once synonymous with Mountain Dew. The front page of YouTube for a time was flooded with Halo 3 machinimas, Arby and the Chief. Anybody remember Phil, my man Phil? So many classic videos and music parodies, you name it.
I'm playing Halo 3. I'm playing Halo 3.
There'll be lots of happy gamers, wait and see. When the third game with Master Chief's released, the White House has been alerted, all the streets will be deserted when Bungie finally gives us Halo 3.
This game has entered the realm of almost untouchable, where if you say anything bad about Halo 3, you will be cursed to a hellish eternity of having to watch your own body be teabagged to oblivion. You attack Halo 3, you're attacking all those great memories, stuff like the custom games, Duck Hunt, the community maps, the unbelievable hype. But you know what? It's time somebody finally stood up and said something, mainly about Halo 3's campaign. For the purpose of this video, we are exclusively looking at the original Halo trilogy. All the spin-offs, Halo Reach, ODST Wars, Halo 2600, none of that is going to be mentioned here.
Break up, now! Watch yourself!
In the context of the Halo trilogy, Halo 3 by far has the best and worst campaign. In terms of its moment-to-moment gameplay, Bungie essentially trimmed the fat. You have these incredible set pieces and levels that just keep moving. There's hardly any downtime. It seriously has some of the highest highs of the entire series, but even with all this, something about Halo 3 either felt disconnected or just a little rushed, especially with its story. Now, each game in the Halo trilogy has a narrative hook that keeps us invested, and they range on their effectiveness.
Now would be a very good time to leave.
Punch it.
Ah, sir!
With Halo 1, that narrative hook was the Halo ring itself, the mystery surrounding it, what it does. It's one of the first things we're introduced to, and a lot of its story revolves around revelations behind the ring. And along the way, we get some great character moments and a very well-constructed atmosphere. Very simple, very effective, and it's why to this day people still argue Halo 1 has the best story of the entire series. Combat Evolved is a game I consider to be pretty much perfect. I still find it so cool how the story by the end just becomes, almost cyclical, like a halo.
Its divine wind will rush through the stars.
In contrast, Halo 2's story is anything but simple. While that game introduces a new Halo ring, you'll notice it doesn't serve the same narrative function we saw in 1. We already know what the rings do, so a simple retread of that wasn't going to work a second time around, and that's because instead, the narrative hook of Halo 2's story is learning about the consequences of your actions from Halo 1 from the enemy's perspective as we play as the Arbiter. We learn about the Covenant and their hegemony, their inner workings, their motivations and goals. We get to see that clash with what we were working for in Halo 1.
How you doing?
Sergeant!
It's no wonder 2's story was so polarizing when it came out. A lot of that has to do with the marketing too, which we'll get onto later, but overall, Halo 2 undertook the ambitious task of providing us two varying perspectives with its story. It's much more cinematic, large in scope, but there was a huge leap in almost every transition from the first game to this. People didn't really like the switching on for protagonists at the time, and it was one of the most common complaints about 2's story, kind of similar to a game that came out pretty recently.
Master Chief, you mind telling me what you're doing on that
How
ship?
good the first one was? To this game right here, this might be the worst, actually, no bullshit, this might be one of the worst games I've ever played.
With Halo 3, its entire narrative hook revolves around conclusion, and really nothing more. Finish the fight, that was the game's tagline and all the marketing. That's really the driving force behind what little story Halo 3 seems to have. For the most part, it's all just big battle, killing off characters, and tying loose ends. There's nothing wrong with that at all, but because Halo 3 has the burden of wrapping up its trilogy, we're left with a story that doesn't really offer much beyond that, and that's mostly because its story decides that's all we really need to see. Short and sweet, Halo 3 is 9 levels, which essentially was the shortest Halo game at the time, with a campaign you can beat in about 6 to 8 hours. And look, I'm all for that. I'd rather have a game that's short and wastes no time than one that drags on and on forever, but I feel like Halo 3 could have spent what little time it had in better ways. The closest thing to a new concept we get in Halo 3 narratively is the Ark, which essentially is the most important setting in the entire series, except that we only spend 2 levels here. And look, the 2 levels we spend here are seriously probably the 2 best in the entire series.
Come on, Bungie. Come on, Bungie. That's it. I'm so close. Halo 3 finished the fight 2007. Halo 3, I worship you. Finish the fight. Finish the fight.
This game is God.
Where do you think you're going with all that makeup?
Sorry, baby girl, I had to do it to you.
So this part here is great. The friendly AI are supposed to cross the bridge. It's a very simple task. You know, sometimes all they need is a little push. A sacrifice had to be made. The bridge demanded blood. Thank you. There we go. See? Okay.
Hurry to the
Take your time, little buddy. Take your time. You're a little shy. It's okay. Come on. There we go. Good boy. Good boy. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna fucking do it. God damn it, Bungie. This part is dope. Hello there.
Back away! I will deal with this Jedi slime myself!
Chief, we're on our way.
Whoa, wait, hold up. What?
If these 2 levels are so much fun, then what's the problem here? Why does it even matter that they're the only 2 that take place here? Well, it just seems like a strange missed opportunity not to build this location, the Ark, as a more prominent part of the game and give Halo 3 some much needed atmosphere. 1 or 2 more levels taking place on the Ark would have done Halo 3 good. I think Halo 3 runs into an issue a lot of third acts have across fiction, and that's lacking a narrative identity beyond just wrapping up loose ends, brushing things under the rug, and tying everything together. A lot of times, the third act just intrinsically can feel like the weakest link. Oftentimes, we'll see a retread of similar imagery, and this can be very effective, or it can feel very shallow and almost like a regression.
Hey, give me another cookie.
That's why third acts are usually so inconsistent, and I think with Halo 3, especially when you compare it to 1 and 2, its story doesn't really offer us much beyond the fact that it's a conclusion. And it's a very hasty one at that. What character-driven moments it does have feel very few and far between, as Halo 3 basically prioritizes just wrapping everything up as fast as possible. And I would say Halo 3's story wastes no time, but it kinda wastes half of it. In fact, Halo 3's story is so thin that not only is the game already short, nothing of note really happens in those first 4 or 5 levels. The majority of them are just filler, and I'm talking really good filler. Those levels are a blast to play through, but there's a reason why you can get halfway through Halo 3's campaign and feel like both everything and nothing has happened. In fact, it's why this cutscene here halfway through the game is one of my favorites in the entire series, because it's when the story of Halo 3 finally decides to do something and shine through. It's just all the main characters meeting together to figure out what the heck they're gonna do, how much are they willing to risk, and who can they trust. It's sad because there really isn't anything else in Halo 3 that kind of resembles this. These moments are very isolated.
And you, shipmaster, just glassed half a continent. Maybe the flood isn't all I should be worried about.
One single flood spore can destroy a species. Were it not for the Arbiter's Council, I would have glassed your entire planet.
What's funny is the one thing that seems to be collectively remembered by everyone about Halo 3's campaign isn't even in the game at all, and that's in its marketing. How many people gush over this Believe advertisement? Even if you've never played Halo 3 before or own an Xbox, this ad just sticks with you. Not only that, the rest of its marketing campaign showed off what was to be this gritty, next-gen experience with a somber tone. Halo Landfall, directed by Neil Blomkamp before he was known as the guy who made District 9, is this violent and brutal short film meant to set up Halo 3's opening levels. somber, gritty, themes of sacrifice. Halo 3 was shaping up to be this epic. But I have to ask, was this marketing misleading? Inconclusive, but at the end of the day, it never really mattered. Halo 3 lightly touches upon themes of sacrifice and the brutality of war, but just barely. It's still under this umbrella of a colorful, almost cartoonish violence, and that worked. I'd say something like Halo Reach far better captures the essence of what this Believe ad is trying to convey. With Halo 3, it was clear Bungie ended up prioritizing action-packed fun over anything else, so when you're playing Halo 3, you're not really wondering where's my blood and gore. Can you really look at these beautiful levels and start wanting something that's gray and washed out like every other shooter at the time was trying to be? Seriously, 14 years later and this game is still absolutely gorgeous. It's really hard not to gawk just at how good everything looks. That is except for maybe the Marine faces.
The enemy is over there, sir!
Nothing in this Believe ad happens in the game, nothing throughout Halo 3's 9 levels is there anything on this scale with this kind of tone and emotional impact. Halo 5 received immense backlash from fans for its deliberately misleading marketing campaign, but that's definitely more of an extreme example. The thing is, the same thing happened with Halo 2. Its marketing centered around fighting the Covenant on Earth. It had this amazing E3 demo that ended up being a vertical slice, and when the game finally came out, people were pissed when they discovered half the game you don't even play as Master Chief.
Bet you can't stick it.
You're on.
So essentially, when making Halo 3, Bungie responded to all this criticism of Halo 2 by basically throwing the baby with the Mountain Dew bathwater. People didn't like Arbiter, so guess what? Halo 3, Arbiter's just kinda there until the game needs him to do something. He gets shafted. Yeah, he's with you for most of the game, but his presence is heavily reduced. Also in Halo 2, people didn't like how the story had suddenly gotten a lot more cinematic and convoluted. Things like Gravemind, a main antagonist, is barely in Halo 3 aside from these very annoying dialogue sequences where the action comes to a screeching halt to hear Cortana and Gravemind shout at each other.
And yet, perhaps...
Okay, shut up. One at a time. Talk one at a time. Talk one at a time. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up. Shut up! No more! No more! Xbox off! You're basically trudging through what is essentially the worst Halo level of the trilogy, where you slowly make your way through this repetitive, ugly earwax plastered catacomb while a talking plant and your AI companion argue with each other. What is this? Look, the Flood only levels have always been kind of a nuisance, but with Halo 3 I actually felt like Bungie finally designed them in the way that was pretty fun to fight. However, all this goes to waste in this slow, boring exercise where the story is basically turned into irritating background noise. You're telling me that instead of all those exciting scenes in Halo 2, you know, like Master Chief delivering the Covenant their bomb, this is what Bungie thought was a better alternative? Also want to touch upon Cortana's role in this game, it's ass. In Halo 2, we last see Cortana staying behind on High Charity while Chief heads back to Earth. With Halo 3, this initially makes for some good drama. There's this mysterious element surrounding how are we going to save her, why is she interrupting gameplay with quotes from the novels. All this feels like it's going to build towards something amazing, and it all culminates to this shit-ass level, where we learn almost nothing new. If you think about it, there's no narrative reason for Cortana to be separated from you for like 90% of the game. You beat the Covenant, you find Cortana, and you blow up the thing. So they spend the entire game building up her absence with very little payoff, especially because you never even faced the Gravemind. They cut the boss fight. The scene where you reunite is very nice, it's one of the more touching moments of Halo 3, but Cortana is such a good companion character. Commentary in 1 and 2 help not only contextualize everything happening around you, but by having this witty AI inside your head the whole time, it made things very entertaining the way it told its story. Chief and Cortana's dynamic constitutes some of the best lines and moments in the series.
Could we possibly make any more noise?
I guess so.
When you finally do find Cortana in Halo 3, it finally begins to feel like Halo again. Yes, that soul that was missing in the majority of the game is back, but by the time you can appreciate it, the game's already over. Why do you go from telling such a simple and exciting story with Halo 1, and an ambitious, very cinematic narrative with Halo 2, and then end up with something that kind of feels lacking in comparison to both? There's this article by Vice which I think helps answer these questions called The Complete Untold History of Halo, where Bungie figureheads like Joseph Staten and Marty O'Donnell discuss the development of each Halo game, and there's this general attitude that Halo 2 and its story was a failure. A lot of stuff had to be cut, the game had a cliffhanger ending that made a lot of people upset, so with Halo 3, Bungie was set on dialing things back. They talk a lot about how they had to make right for what they did with Halo 2. It's very strange because I think Halo 2 is agreed to be by most fans an incredible achievement, myself included. At first there was a lot of how can we recapture Halo with Halo 3 and kind of undo a lot of the things we did with 2. My opinion is always that you can't go backwards. None of the fans want you to go backwards. You have to go forward in the right direction. So that sent us spinning. When half the team is trying to go forward and half the team is trying to go back, you're just going to spin in place. I think that quote right there speaks volumes to why Halo 3 ended up the way it did. You see, Bungie was set on making the story more straightforward and streamlined, kind of like how Halo 1 was. Like Halo 1, Halo 3's cutscenes are short and simply meant to contextualize the level. There are very few drawn-out scenes. Typically, it's the gameplay that drives us forward. Halo 2, in turn, was very cinematic and all over the place. There were a lot of memorable moments here. Halo 2 was ambitious. And you see, Halo 3 is trying to tell its story like 1, but it's a follow-up to 2, so 3's story falls short of reaching the heights of 1, and it feels like a weak follow-up to 2 because it doesn't really try to build off of 2's style and setup. So it puts Halo 3 in this very strange position, as it has the best gameplay of the trilogy. It's the most refined and clean, but story-wise, it's absolutely the weakest and narratively doesn't do a single thing better than 1 or 2 in my opinion. And look, I can't fault Bungie too much for wanting to address those initial criticisms, but I feel like they should have went with their gut a little bit more.
We had been working on this story non-stop, making compromise after compromise because there were a lot of things that different people didn't agree on. We write the first draft of the script, but it's not great.
I didn't see any shape to this story. Nothing happy, nothing sad, nothing intense.
Like, I think it needs more punch.
When you're trying to balance story and gameplay, one can't come at the expense of the other.
In a perfect world, Halo 3 would be a bit of a longer game, there'd be more levels in general, but just a few extra levels in the arc would have been great. The presentation of 3 would probably be more akin to 2, so you get more of those fun moments, more scenes we can invest in, and maybe use that time to capture a lot of that tone of desperation, sacrifice, and brutality that was in all the marketing. And third, I feel like the Arbiter should have a greater presence. His dynamic with Chief in 3 is kind of interesting. They got this sort of silent bond that develops over the game, they're side by side for pretty much all of it, and they say very little to each other, but to Halo 3's credit, it's pretty dope.
Of fate you must abide. We trade one villain for another.
But I feel like they could have done so much more with these two together. I mean, you spent a whole game trying to get them here, so Halo 3 really should have been more about this duo. And I think that would actually help fill the void that Cortana leaves behind. 2 birds, 1 plasma grenade, you know? Okay, so after all this, why did Halo 3 seem to work for so many people? If Halo 3's marketing was so misleading, if the story really wasn't that good, how come people have nothing but the highest praises for this game? Well, like I said, Halo 3 was a lot of people's first Halo, making it the best and worst entry point. How could you be disappointed with 3's story if you don't even know what the first 2 games set up? I think by trimming all the fat, so to speak, Halo 3 feels not only very short, but there just aren't many moments of downtime and atmosphere and storytelling. Overall, this game is still amazing and so much fun to play through. I feel like if they had to sacrifice telling a better story in order to make Halo 3 that much more fun, it was probably worth it. Look, it's hard to realize the believe ad is missing from the game when you're too busy trying to figure out what's the coolest way you can take down these 2 scarabs. It's kind of funny because in 2007, despite being the most hyped game of the year, Halo 3 kind of got overshadowed critically by games like BioShock, Portal, Half-Life 2, Episode 2, Mass Effect, and also a little game called Call of Duty Modern Warfare. It was just an absolute stacked year with games telling their stories in interesting ways and these incredible blockbuster sequences, so when we focus mainly on narrative and bells and whistles, it's easy for Halo 3 to kind of seem almost lackluster in comparison. But I find Halo 3 makes up for that in so many different areas. It's way more replayable than most of those games, and Bungie did prioritize having fun and approaching set pieces in new and exciting ways. All the community features which led to so many different creative projects, machinimas, and game types creating memories for years. This gave Halo 3 a legacy and longevity that most games could only ever dream of. I also think to 3's credit, the story ends on a good note. It's the perfect ending here. Master Chief adrift in space in cryosleep waiting for the day he's needed again. cyclical. Halo. I feel like by the third entry in anything, it's always inevitable that something is going to disappoint someone. And you know, for the longest time, I tried to find a movie trilogy that perfectly feels analogous and encapsulates how I feel the Halo trilogy progressed in terms of storytelling, and I think I finally got it. Halo 3 is not Return of the Jedi, Halo 3 is not Rise of Skywalker, it's not Back to the Future 3, and it's not Stuart Little 3, Call of the Wild. Halo 3's story is X-Men The Last Stand. Don't kill me, but look. You got a movie that basically just kills many major characters for the sake of it. You got the implication of a beloved character losing control. Previous characters kind of get shafted in terms of their presence in this one or don't show up at all. And it ends with the main character believed to be dead by most, but shown to be alive. Wait, that's The Dark Knight Rises. God damn it, I give up. Really, what do I know? I'm just a guy complaining about a critically acclaimed game almost a decade and a half later. I'm definitely the bad guy in this situation, but I will be cursed to watch my own body be teabagged for all of eternity. Thank you for watching.